heard of the internationally acclaimed best-selling author Vassiliki Ryden?
For the past 20 years, Vassiliki Ryden has traveled the world seeking peace and working for Christian unity. She's worked with ecumenical organizations from Central and South America, Asia. This is an important time. If we're going to face the challenges of global warming, of the care and stewardship of this fragile planet we call Earth, we're going to need to hear voices like Vasiliki's. And the good news is that God chooses average, ordinary, common people to do the extraordinary.
Having traveled to over 80 countries as a renowned speaker and humanitarian, she is one of the most followed peace leaders in the world today.
I did come into contact with her when she came to Delhi. For me, was certainly an eye-opener.
Her book series, True Life in God, has been published in 40 languages and sold internationally. She has spoken to millions of people, 500,000 in the Philippines alone, over 1 million fans on Facebook, and hundreds of thousands on Twitter.
I call upon Vassiliki to come and share with us.
Prophecy has to be announced on the rooftops. So I'm doing what God has asked me to do, and He's commanded me to do so.
Vassiliki has been rightly respected and endorsed by hundreds of church leaders.
Arroyo. Akel Bitayi is resident King of Jordan. Emile Lahoud, President of Lebanon. Mario Pupillo, Mayor of Lanciano, Italy. Pope Shenouda III, Coptic Orthodox Church. Orthodox Patriarch Theodorus I, Alexandria, Egypt. Orthodox Patriarch Daniel, Romania. Bishop Luong Taira, Vatican. Orthodox Archbishop Jeremiah Farin, South America. Head Imam Maulana Abul Haq, Bangladesh. Vassiliki is also a gifted painter. I met Vassiliki for the first time in Switzerland when I was a missionary. We met together.
What happens to the money that comes in?
All the money goes to the charity houses that we have around the world, like 25 of them now. And we feed the poor, and we clothe them and give medicine as well. I've never taken any money, and I'm not interested in that. I want the good of people. I want to give them hope to what I receive, because God is calling us to give us hope.
All right, Vassiliki, thank you.
Thank you
so much. It's a really interesting story. I don't think I've met anyone quite like her before.
Neither have I.
Greet most cordially the Spanish-speaking people of the spirituality group of True Life in God. Catholic Cardinal Topo, India.
Her latest book has become an overnight bestseller and is #1 on Barnes & Noble online.
The next one.
Welcome to this week's edition of Good Books, where each week we interview an author of a newly published work of nonfiction that we believe is worth your time. The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect the views of the University of Texas Brownsville or this station. And now, here is your host, Dr. John Cook.
Welcome once again to another edition of Good Books. I'm your host this week, Dr. John Cook, Associate Professor of Communication at the University of Texas at Brownsville.
Yes, this is a good one as well, but I wanted to go through these briefly. I don't know what link you're supposed to click on for this. Okay.
All right, unusual guest joining us here in the chat room. She has nearly 200,000 Twitter followers, millions of believers around the world. Crowds gather to hear her speak. She says she communicates directly with God. Her name is Vassiliki Ryden. And Vassiliki, welcome to the chat room.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for having me with you.
Tell me, how does God speak with you?
Well, it's now 27 years ago, and I was somebody who never prayed or even looked and searched for God, away from my own church. And this is how it happened. It was I was writing that moment a list of grocery list to give to my domestic so that he goes and buys the food. I had people coming that night. And suddenly there, where I was doing this grocery list, I had a manifestation of my angel. I saw him in the way that we can see interiorly. It was so obvious. And he touched my wrist, my right wrist, and placed my hand on the paper, like saying to me, write what I'm going to tell you.
Well, we actually have some video of you handwriting these messages because you believe that God is talking with you directly and that you write his message, his spoken word, down, and that he's using you as a vessel. There are, Vasil, a lot of people are going to doubt your story. They're listening to it right now and they're saying, no way. There are some who probably will believe it. What do you say to the people who just don't believe that this is happening?
Well, there will be those that will not believe, and I understand them. I mean, it's something very, very big. So one has to be careful and skeptic, and I understand the skeptics. But when they will see and they hear my story and see what I have received as messages for our times from God, why not? I mean, God can speak whenever he wishes. But of course, many people will say, and who are you? I mean, why me? I was just then a housewife, here I am, and then God manifested himself. He can manifest himself whenever he wished to, for our times. And I had the experience of God. I mean, it was obvious.
Now, 500,000 people came out to hear you speak in the Philippines. You're starting to get a global following that really people do want to hear what you have to say. Your new book is called Heaven is Real and So Is Hell. You believe that you've witnessed both of those?
Yes, I've seen visions because the Lord wanted to give me the visions of heaven, that heaven really exists, and of hell, because many people like to hear only of heaven but not hell. And so that's why I had those visions of hell and heaven, but also the manifestation of who God is actually. How is he God? How is God? Because many people say, yeah, we know God, but just from a book, by reading the book. And some of them have intellectualized God, so they cannot approach God. But the way he approached me, and I say to people, he is approachable. He is like a father, more than a father. Because when he spoke to me, he was more like as if I knew him, part of my family, so paternal, so loving, so merciful. And that really knocked me out because I expected some God who is just severe and is going to condemn us.
Yeah, an interesting perspective, and certainly one that many will want to hear. Your book is called Heaven is Real and So Is Hell. You have a book signing tonight at Oakbrook at Barnes & Noble, 7 p.m. Vassiliki, Ryden, welcome to Chicago, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Susanna Rochelle, you hear this, and you know that a lot of people are looking at their TVs and they're saying, well, no, there's no way this woman communicates with God. She just thinks she does.
You know what? Thank you for being here. I'm the daughter of a minister, and I have a very close personal relationship with the God of my understanding. I respectfully am skeptical. I've done some research on some of your readings, Vasula. I have a question for you because you talk a lot about God speaking to you about things that are happening right now, in timely topics. You're in Chicago right now. Has God spoken to you with a message for the people of Chicago on what we are supposed to do about the crime?
Well, that book that I have written, and it was just inspired by God who gave me the messages. He speaks to everyone. Mm-hmm. He says to everyone, come as you are. Yes. All of you, come as you are. And do not wait till you become saints to come to me, and I will turn you into a saint.
Okay.
So he wants everybody out of his mercy to come to him. The message, is 27 years old. I mean, 27 years I've been receiving these messages. They have been studied by great theologians in mystical theology, and they see that everything is divine.
Some say that you did predict the 9/11 situation because you talked about or you wrote about the Twin Towers collapsing and things like that. So I understand that she doesn't hear about everything, so maybe not just crime or just something else, but you do say that you get messages.
I do, and there are many warnings from God because out of his mercy he is warning us. He's losing so many of us, and he wants us to turn to him and remember him and who we are. We come from the King of Kings, and we are the daughters of the Most and sons of the Most High. So we should not forget our nobility.
It's interesting because there is so much of resurgence of people looking at faith again, maybe renewed faith. The Bible is the most watched show on television right now. You've got a situation where a new pope is inspiring new hope for many Catholics considering going back to their church. But you're not necessarily embraced by mainstream religion. You've been kicked out of churches before, haven't you?
Yes, but you know, I've met this pope now, the recent one, Francis. I met him as a cardinal, and he was very open to me, and he wouldn't have received me if he thought I was just faking the whole thing. I met Cardinal Ratzinger before he became pope as well, 3 months before he became pope, because he wanted to meet me when he found out about me, and it was so controversial. In the end, he made a study about my case, and as it was positive, he received me in his private saloon.
All right, Vassiliki Ryden, again, thanks for joining us and sharing your story. Susanna, where do you lie on this whole thing as you hear that story?
Sure. One thing I just want to ask about is you and I were raised in the same faith, which is Greek Orthodox, and I know that in our church we believe that people who, well, first of all, there's a lot of skepticism about being able to speak with God, but even so, we feel people who have these kinds of messages shouldn't profit off of them. So what happens with the book sales, or how do you give back everything you make? What happens to the money that comes in?
All the money goes to the charity houses that we have around the world, like 25 of them now, and we feed the poor, and we clothe them and give medicine as well. For myself, I take nothing of that book. Nothing. I've never taken anything which the other book that has the messages as well. I've never taken any money, and I'm not interested in that. I want the good of people. I want to give them hope through what I receive, because God is calling us to give us hope.
All right, Vassiliki, thank you.
Thank
you
you
so much. It's a really interesting story. I don't think I've met anyone quite like her before.
Neither have I.
And I'm sure she'll have a very polarizing reaction from everyone watching. So thank you for sharing your story. 9:20 is the time. We're back with more Good Day Chicago in a moment.
I'd just like to ask a question before I go into the book here, why I've written this book. Do you understand me and do you hear me? All right. Who totally knew, let's say, who doesn't know me at all? Because there are some who know me already. Can you put your hands up, please, so that I know the difference here? Thank you. Thank you. I'm a Christian and baptized in a Greek Orthodox church, but I have never practiced my faith. Never. So I was one of the...
All right, unusual...
Vassiliki Ryden is got a brand new book. It's called Heaven is Real, but So is Hell, an eyewitness account of what it is to come Vassula takes the reader into the supernatural world where she has experienced the hidden forces that affect every moment of our lives. It features her amazing encounters with both good and evil forces and reveals profoundly important messages to all humanity. Largely hidden until now, sometimes harrowing but filled with hope, it answers many of the questions that people have been asking for thousands of years. At the same time, offers a glimpse into God's love and justice and what is soon to come. In the title of the book, you indicate both heaven and hell are real. How did this knowledge come to you? In visions, writing, or both?
No, because many people do not believe that the devil exists, nor that there is a hell. The Lord himself gave me a vision, and I was in the vision itself. You know, when he gave the vision, I lived the vision. And he wanted to show me hell. So I've seen part of hell. I can't say that I saw the whole hell, but part of it. Suddenly I found myself like in a cave, very low cave. The ceiling of the cave was rock, very low. The way when I was walking, I felt my feet sticking on some sort of muddy gray color earth. And then there was, because Satan can appear in any form. He can be like an angel, he could become like a beast, like a black dog. You know, it's a spirit. So, but he appeared to me as a man standing in front of me, giving his back to me. And it was as if he heard me coming, and he turned around, and when he saw me, he spat on the ground. And he very harshly said, "Now we have even worms coming to us to see us, what we're doing." And I saw him with some sort of fire in his hand, throwing on the souls that went to hell. You know, some the people who went into the damnation, into hell. And I saw this. In the end, to make a long story short, because this is a long vision, I asked Jesus, "Why did you want to show me that?" He said, "Because people do not believe anymore that Satan exists and hell is a place. This is why you have to talk about it, because the latest trick of Satan is to hide himself. This is one thing. This is the bad part. This is the vision of hell. But he also showed me heaven. So heaven exists, and I saw heaven, and it's a wonderful description about the myriads of angels that I saw in the holy abode of."
We read that in the Old Testament times, God spoke directly to Moses. Does God still do that sort of thing today? And if so, does he speak to ordinary people, or does it have to be a special person? We'll talk to you about that next on Insights. Welcome to Insight. I'm Paul Arthur. Phone lines are open for your calls across Canada. Love to hear from you today. Does God speak to ordinary people? I mean, you know, somebody told you that God was speaking to them, and God had a special message for you, and I'm going to deliver it. You know, I think a couple things come to mind. Are you going to listen to that person, or are you going to call, 911, right, and get this person off to a mental institute very quickly? I guess it depends on the sense you get about that person, I suppose, delivering the message. I think, anyhow. I mean, there's sometimes I've met people who say they have had a message for me, and I can tell, this is probably not from God, okay? Other times, there really has been a message I feel has been from God, and it's made a difference in my life. And I know there are Christians watching right now who do believe that God does not speak directly to anyone in this age except through his word. So I'd love to hear from your point of view today as well. And I think certainly if God does speak to us directly, I think that message does need to line up with the written Word of God, with those principles, right? I mean, it's not going to be different than, what he's already written. But today's guest is somewhat controversial. I mean, she believes that she receives messages directly from Jesus through handwriting, which is a bit of a different take on things, for sure. We normally kind of think of that coming through a prophecy that's coming orally. So your views on this, pro or con, are welcome. All right, I think it's worth debating and talking about. Okay, so wherever you're at, even if you're calling from a non-Christian perspective, we welcome your calls today as well. 1-888-816-2545. Our guest is Vassiliki. Now, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right. I know it's spelled Ryden, but I think it was Ryden. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
I got it. Excellent. Okay. From True Life in God Ministries, and that's www.tlig.org, the website. So you're on a cross-Canada tour. It's been a couple of years, well, probably 3 or 4 years, actually, since the last time you've been here. So how has that gone so far? You've done a lot of cities so far.
Well, we started on the 1st of October, and we've done so far 16 meetings in different towns.
Okay.
So we are here now in Lethbridge.
Yes.
And from Lethbridge we'll continue to 3 more cities.
Yeah, tonight, as a matter of fact, we could bring that information up on the screen there, too. Tonight from 7 till 9, right here at the Miracle Channel. Everybody's welcome to that. And, of course, Calgary, I think, and Grand Prairie, Abbotsford, and Vancouver, I think it is, right? So, okay, and a toll-free number there. You can get in contact with the people in those individual cities, all right? Now, tell us a bit about True Life in God Ministries, what you do. I know you're doing some things differently now, and you have a few years ago you were mentioning as well. So tell us a bit about what you do.
Well, to start with, let me say a few things that I heard you say about receiving prophecies in written form.
Yeah.
Well, it is actually locution. It's the voice. The proper word is locution.
Okay.
And if we do believe that God is not dead, but alive, and he speaks, he can speak to his people whenever he wants and to whoever he chooses.
Right.
And in fact, it is known that he chooses always very weak instruments, very weak people without any knowledge. And I was one of these, as in fact he said, I've chosen you because of your wretchedness, and through your wretchedness I shall show my power, my authority, and that I am. Now, I'm receiving the message, the inner voice, which is locution, and then I write it down, and my writing is transformed. But it's first that I hear, and then that I write.
So it is not in your spirit, in your mind,
exactly.
You're hearing this message, and then you're writing it down.
Exactly.
Although the handwriting apparently is different than your own handwriting?
Yes.
Which is kind of odd, isn't it?
It is odd, and I was asking myself, why is it changing? Why cannot I write it with my own handwriting? But a specialist who is an exorcist about automatic writing, as we call it, he's an expert in that, and he's a priest in France called Father Curti. He has studied a lot of these matters, and he said that this writing that I receive is not automatic writing, but it is hieratic, which means sacred writing. And it happens that, the body can be taken by God entirely, and we can call it ecstasy. So they are there, they cannot move, they are like a stone, because they see a vision of God.
So
and
somebody is in a trance, as the Bible talks about.
It's not a trance, it's ecstasy.
Okay, but a similar sort of thing where God can, in fact, take somebody, whether they put somebody down on the ground and leave them there for a while, and those kind of things.
Capitulate him completely, and he capitulates my hand.
Okay.
Because parts of the body can be taken by God, right?
All right?
He can speak through your mouth directly.
Yes.
He spoke through a donkey's mouth in the Old Testament. So why cannot God speak through a mouth of a woman?
Well, when you come to mention the donkey, I guess I qualify, So it's an interesting explanation, because I know it does cause some controversy out there. All right, so you get these messages, and you've been traveling the world sharing these messages. The messages tend to be focusing on church unity as well as personal relationship with God. Is that correct?
Correct. And
prophecies too?
Prophecies too. It's actually a lot of them, prophecies. But also let me tell you something that, coming to the first, because I didn't complete the first question, the first suggestion or whatever we said, is that I want them to know, the people, that I was not looking for God. I never looked for God, right?
Okay.
And these locutions that I receive could be from 3 sources. Either from myself,
from yourself?
myself and mine, which I had never studied any catechism. So they cannot come from my mind because my mind was empty. I didn't even know the difference of churches and all this. And there's a great teaching about the Holy Spirit. So I've never studied any theology, no catechism. So it's either from God or from Satan or from my subjectivity.
Right,
so if it is from subjectivity, there's zero because there was nothing. If it's from Satan, it cannot be because it converts people to come back to God, to come back to their church.
So you've had good fruit saying
good
that people
fruit,
have converted.
Plenty of good fruits and testimonies. And the third would be left God. So we have to see, discernment is needed.
You lean toward God. And
I would say discernment is needed. We cannot just...
We need to judge the fruit and not necessarily the fruit.
And then see the contents of it. What is it about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I was uneducated in theology and catechism.
You're in a Greek Orthodox background, though, right? Is that right?
The Lord is good, for he has taught me. He is known to teach and instruct the poor and the wretched. My Father Almighty, your Father, the Almighty, is robed in power and majesty. Let's with one voice praise him and fulfill the vows you and I made to the Most High. Let's address our poem to the King. But how I fear to hear, have you been present at my council? Have you been present at my council? Do not fear. I have driven you out from beneath the earth ground. I have unburied you and said, peace will be yours, my child. Out of the land of Egypt, I brought forth prophets and saints, a blessing on the land of Egypt. May its foliage remain green and the trees that grow by the river Nile prosper and continue to produce their fruit to feed its people. A glorious throne was set in each place, where the Virgin Mary, my mother, increased Joseph, the just, and myself passed by. Egypt, we tread on your soil and incense raised in heaven as we pass by. Have you not read in scriptures? Ambassadors will come from Egypt. That's Psalm 68, verse 31. Why? Did you not know that I have anointed you as well?
Peace be with you. Flower, delight me and meditate more. Pray more about... Breath will strip the plunderer. Many members of your nation object to my call of unity and have accustomed their steps to walk their own way.